here and we started to talk a little bit about Akhenaten. I wanted to kind of jump into it. I wanted to have this conversation to talk about Akhenaten today and to talk about this whole idea around monotheism and the idea and what he's gone down in history for, and to examine it and to address it and really ask the question around it. So and does it matter? We're going to really talk about what they say about Akhenaten. Does that matter? Is it real? And how can we learn from it today? So I want to kind of jump into that. And I'll say up front, God bless you for those who are supporting. I pray, put your comments, your suggestions, things you want to say down in the comments below. Give a like to this, hit the like button here, give a like to this video, subscribe to my channel, tell other people about it. More often, tell other people about it. Let's share this with somebody. Let's get the conversation out there so that we are talking regularly about ancient Kemet, ancient Kush, different things about African history and history in general. And I have membership pages and membership support that are either here on YouTube or Facebook that you can join and get more information that you can actually download and read more of this. We're not just talking about it, but we're reading about it. So I want to kind of advance the conversation. Let's talk about ancient Kush and ancient Kemet on a regular basis. Let's not make it just something that's on the channel or the history channel that we hear every so often that comes up whenever it comes up, or if you happen to see a magazine in the grocery store, you pick it up. Let's make it something that we talk about, in particular Black people and people in general, talk about ancient Kush and Kemet in a regular basis, because so much is done around them. So much has been learned for them. So much of history has come out of this civilization, this society, and this area in the Nile Valley that we should be talking about it regularly and not relying on other people to give us that information. So I kind of wanted to do that as a setup and now talk about Akhenaten. Let's jump into this conversation and talk about him. And you may know that he is credited by some with being the first person in human history to be monotheistic and to support monotheism. And a lot of times in history, we like to put a point in the ground and say this was the first time this happened, which obviously was probably not the first time. It's just we like to say that. But we'll jump into this. Let's have this conversation and dig a little bit into his life, into some things around him and about him. And you'll see this here, right here is the nose and lips, essentially the face of Akhenaten. And this is Nefertiti. So this is his main wife, Nefertiti. And I'll just mention it up front so you can see that. So let's get some background around Akhenaten, just see what we're talking about and to get some ideas. So he lived around 1353 BC or thereabouts. From about 1353 BC to 1336 BC, that's when Akhenaten reigned. And it was about 4 or 5 years or thereabout into his reign where he began to change the worship of the deities that were taking place in ancient Kemet, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And just to set him up, so at 1353 or thereabout BC is when he took power. He is the son of Amenhotep III. So Amenhotep III is one of the most prolific builders, if you will, in the New Kingdom. So this is the New Kingdom of ancient Kemet. This is after the time they kicked out the Hyksos. This is after Mentuhotep II. This is after the Great Pyramids. This is during the empire time of Kemet. This is during the expansion when it's controlling Kush and it's going all the way out to what is today Syria and has all kinds of people that are vassal states or paying it tribute and is controlling a lot of land and a lot of resources. This is what's happening in the New Kingdom. So Akhenaten is in the New Kingdom. He's in the New Kingdom and he's stretched his kingdom far and wide, and so is the people before him. So he's kind of inheriting that. And he is also, as I mentioned, he's the son of Amenhotep III. And so his throne name, if you will, when he becomes king, he's known as Amenhotep IV. That's his name. And Amen is a reference to Amen, the hidden aspect of God that was such a significant power in the southern part of Kemet where Thebes is and Waset is. That was the center of power in the New Kingdom. The capital was in the southern part of Kemet and what we call Thebes, which is Waset there. So not only was he the son of Amenhotep III, he was the father of King Tut, King Tutankhamen. So the most famous discovery, if you will, in ancient Kemetic history and probably in all of archaeology this has got to be the number one discovery, is the discovery of King Tut's tomb and in his place where he was buried. Well, Akhenaten is King Tut's father. And it's so funny. I'll just take a bit of a side note. As we begin to talk about, whether or not we think we know what King Tut looked like, and you have all these different things and these reenactments or, refurbishing of what they think he might look like or different things like that. We know a whole lot about him. We even have a mannequin of King Tut that was in his tomb. There's like 5,000 items were in his tomb that's all over the world in all kinds of museums. We know a lot about King Tutankhamen and his father and his grandfather and grandmother and his line. So this idea that it's mysterious is kind of ridiculous. We have depictions of him in the day. So that's just kind of a side note. I kind of get back to Akhenaten now. So Akhenaten, his dad. So Akhenaten is in charge. So he is the king in 1353. He inherits the throne. His father, Amenhotep III, is no longer king and has passed away. And he's now king. And a few years, 3 or 4, maybe 5 years into his reign, he starts to begin to look at a deity by the name of Aten that he calls Aten, and that is represented by the sun and the rays of the sun. And there's some interesting things about that as we think about, why he did this and what he did this for. And I'll share this right here. And this is from the tomb of Ramose, who was a vizier, an official under Akhenaten during the New Kingdom, during Akhenaten's reign. And you can see here on the left side in yellow where it talks about, this is Ramose's tomb, and he is basically having a conversation and talking about Aten and talking about Akhenaten, and he talks about Akhenaten and saying, that the monuments that you make will be like heaven, and he's giving glory to Aten. And he's also saying about Akhenaten, the existence of the monuments that you make will exist, into heaven, like the existence of heaven, and that you are the only one who knows who is in possession of the designs of Aten. You are the only one who knows the designs or the plans of Aten, and that's something to think about, because when Akhenaten is claiming Aten as the deity that should be worshipped, and kind of erasing other deities and removing their marks and some of their references in some of the temples, like a temple at Karnak and various places. He is also kind of proclaiming himself as being the one and only person who knows the prophecy and the designs of Aten. So basically all the other deities, whether it's Amen and Ptah and various places, even in Nubia, because at this time, ancient Kemet controlled Kush. They controlled Kush. They were down by the third cataract and near the ancient city near the city of Kerma. And he had a town there, and he had even destroyed some of the representations that his forefathers had made in Kush that were, of the New Kingdom people who were there. He had destroyed some of those representations and put up representations of Aten. So he's doing this not just in ancient Kemet. He's doing this in other places where he has control, and Kush is one of them. He's putting up monuments to Aten, saying we will worship Aten. But the question arises out of it, because you see a lot of depictions of him and Nefertiti and his daughters and other wives and princesses referencing and revering Aten. But when you think about it, him being the sole person who knows the divine will of Aten gives him a lot of power. So I don't know the man's heart, right? So I'm not saying I know his heart, but let's talk about it a little bit. That's what we're here to have conversations. That's what you can do with history. You take the information that you have, what you know and what you study, and you start to make sense out of it, because history should mean something to you. It shouldn't just be something that's on the stage. God bless you so much thank you guys for joining. I appreciate it. Team Z. Any questions? I'm sure you have a lot to contribute. And Zoltar the Magnificent, thank you. So God bless you. Thank you so much for sharing that with the House of Conscience. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Zoltar. So as we God bless you. So as we keep talking about, jump into this, I'm interested in your thoughts about this, because he becomes the high priestess of Aten, and he's basically the sole possessor of what this new deity wants. And I want to mention, because I have to mention, and I know you know it, and I know you know this in the audience, he is not the first person to say that all of existence comes from one source. That idea has been around in Kemetic thought and Kemetic literature for a long period of time. If you read even some of the Egyptologists like E. Wallace Budge and things like that, and read different things about Egyptian literature or the Papyrus of Ani, you hear them talk about gods and deities in ancient Kemet, and they talk about the existence of Neter, the existence of one source, that all things came from one source. And I even remember a specific quote from E. Wallace Budge where he says, this idea, this remarkable idea of this one source of creation, one God manifesting itself in all these different things, has been around since as far as we can see back and look at the Kemetic record. That it seems to be, what he says, as far as we can go back, there is never a time when the Kemetic person is without this idea. That's what he says. You can look it up. You can Google Wallace Budge. He's somebody who's studying it. And so that idea that there's one source of creation is very important, very significant. Even the Shabaka stone, which comes after Akhenaten, so it comes after Akhenaten, talks about Ptah being the source of creation and there being one God who brought all things into being. Now, obviously, in ancient Kemet, they believed that God had a myriad of manifestations, that God was in everything, that God's energy, God's manifestation was in everything. And so you found them deifying and venerating, each aspect of God that they saw. And it's important now, I know people say this a lot, not to just take our perspective and put it on them, because they have their own way of dealing with their concept of deities and their concept of God. To me, the most important thing is, how do you treat people? So if this is your idea of God, if this is your religion, if you believe this, spirituality versus religion, how do you actually treat people? Does your belief in God translate to you treating people better? Because I don't care if you say you believe in God and you treat people horribly. What good is that? How does that help me? How does that help anybody if you're a hateful person? versus whether or not you have some type of morality. And that idea is that your service of God should be reflected in your behavior, be reflected in what you do to others and how you treat other people. So Akhenaten, he begins to say, Aten is the only one who should be worshipped. Now, whether he's doing that for religious reasons, maybe he really had a revelation, or maybe is he trying to say, you know what, the priests of Amen are very powerful. At this time, Waset had been a very significant power since the Middle Kingdom, since Mentuhotep II put the capital there. And it had always been a significant area in ancient Kemet, and even prehistory, it had been a significant area. And the power around Amen and the priest of Amen and the temple at Karnak, we even talk about Shephenwepet II, who was God's wife of Amen, a priestess there, later on the Kushite dynasty, how important that role was and how important Amen was in general to it. Character is most important. You're right. Yeah, character is most important. That makes 100%. That makes 100%. Character is most important. So the temple of Amen and the worship of Amen, and Amen representing, as you probably know, the hidden aspect of God, that which is you cannot be seen. And there's so many different religions and traditions who talk about parts of God that are just unknowable, that you can't see, or you can't see God's face, or you wouldn't be able to pronounce God's name, or there's some aspect of God that is hidden. Well, that's what Amen represented, literally the hidden one. And we say Amen, whether or not it's directly connected, you can tell me, we say Amen. I even did a little exercise. You could do it yourself. And I just on my own, I was just looking, I said, what's the first word in the Bible? I was reading about what's the first word? I'm reading the King James Version. I read different versions as well. And the very first word in the Bible is in, like in the beginning, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In. And the very last word of the Bible is Amen. And I just like in Amen. And I thought about that. And I do not think that the word Amen that we use or Atum or Adam is a coincidence, that, these are very significant deities and deifications of God in ancient Kemet. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that there's significance, and there's a lot that came down from ancient Kemet that's passed on in a lot of different ways that we don't even recognize anymore. We don't see it. We don't recognize it. We don't talk about it. But if we start to study it, we'll start to recognize it, and we'll start to be, I'm looking at the Atem. Okay, I'm looking at there you go. The hymn to Atem, yeah. So if we start to study this more often, we'll recognize it. And that doesn't mean you detach yourself from God. It doesn't mean you don't serve God. A lot of people, I think, are afraid to dig deep into Akhenaten, to dig deep into Kemetic spirituality, because they're afraid it will attack something that we have today. We do this very, very cursory look at as Akhenaten and monotheism, and we just leave it. We say, okay, he's the first person in history to support monotheism. Way to go. And then we just kind of leave it alone. But we really don't dig deeper into it. And what were they practicing before? Did that translate into good behavior? What did that mean for people around? Did it mean more righteousness? Did it mean more morality? How does it relate to what we do today? There's many questions we can ask about that are significant questions. So he starts to begin to, on the 4th or 5th year of his reign or thereabouts, he starts to begin to erase other depictions and references to other deities there in the southern part of Kemet, because that was where the capital, the control was, and in other places, like I mentioned, in Kush, in Nubia, where they were in control as well. He begins to chip out their names and to erase them and replace them with references to Aten. And he has a beautiful temple. The artwork is just beautiful. He has a beautiful temple and portion that he made at the temple of Karnak for Aten. And I'll kind of show you just some pictures of that as he starts to make these things, and this is just an example of him actually sacrificing, killing his duck, if you will, this fowl for Aten. And you can see the rays that are coming down on the for Aten that are coming down upon the duck. And then you can see right here, these are some talatats from the temple of Aten that's at Karnak in the southern part of Kemet. These beautiful depictions of him and sun rays, and it's him, and you have Queen Nefertiti. Various depictions are there. He did a lot in terms of building and of significance as he began to worship Aten and to put that out there. So he begins to chip away at other aspects and other depictions of deities like Amen in various places. He does that in Thebes and Waset, like I said, in the southern part of Kemet. And then he decides to move the entire capital of Kemet away from the south. He doesn't go all the way north. He actually goes in the middle, in the middle of the command. So he doesn't go to the delta to move the capital or keep it in the south. He moves kind of halfway up, and it's called Amarna. So you can look it up. You'll hear it say the Tel Amarna tablets, and there are a lot. There's a period of time where he's basically building a city, and he's building a city for Aten, right there in the middle of Kemet, right there between the delta and the southern part of Kemet. He's building a new city, and there are boundary markers which you can find that are all kind of kept and preserved. Boundary markers where he lays out the boundaries for the city. He talks about why he's doing this for Aten. And then you have very important things like the Tel Amarna letters that are found, where he has correspondence between him and other kings from other parts of Syria or various parts of what we might call the Middle East today, various parts of Western Asia. He's doing various correspondences with them. There's all kinds of art that's developing, and there's a certain style that develops around his worship of Aten, if you will. And so as he's doing this, he's basically chipping away at the other deities. And I mentioned, he's basically saying that, this is God, and I am the one who understands God's plans. I'm the one who understands this new God's plan. And so it becomes the question, is he doing this because he wants power? Is he doing this because he wants to just take that capital all away from where Amen is? He wants to take away power from the priest of Amen. He wants to assert himself as being the only one who knows the answer of God, and then being able to then kind of put power out there. So I'm both the priest and the pharaoh. I'm both the priest and the king. So that's a very important thing. And as I talk about it, I'm interested in what you say, because as I get to this, at some point I started to ask myself, who cares? Like, what does it matter? Like, what does it matter if you think of a person as being monotheistic, or if you have spirituality versus religion? What does it matter? Because I think of religion, and you can tell me what your thoughts are a set of practices. And everybody has a different definition. So your definition is probably right for you. I'm just giving you how I interpret it. A lot of times it's a set of practices. It's a practices that you may perform, and you could perform these practices, but not actually be holy, not actually be moral. I was looking at a photograph. I was going to show it, and maybe one day I will show it. It's a photograph of these two young girls, they're really young girls, and they are enslaved in Egypt in 1852. So it's more modern day. It's not ancient Egypt. It's 1852. And this is during the Arab, Muslim enslavement of other people in Africa. And it wasn't a color thing. It was a religious thing. And the look on these two girls' faces, you just knew you could just see what was happening to them. They were probably being raped. What was being happening? You could just see what was happening and the pain on their faces. And the man standing over them was just as dark as they were. Did it matter if he went to church, or if he prayed, a certain amount of times a day, and if he fasted and did all the things he was supposed to do, if he was raping and enslaving these girls? And that was okay. I mean, we think about religion, we think about spirituality. At some point in time, it should relate to our relationship to God. And do we do things that make a difference? Do we do things that are moral? And that, to me, is one of the things that stand out. A lot of times we talk about ancient Kemet, and people will talk about whether or not they are descendants of ancient Kemet. And can you even talk about ancient Kemet if you're not from Egypt? Or things like, people will say things like that. But do you even practice the tradition? Do you even live according to Ma'at? Do you even try to have a set of laws that are where you treat people as you want to be treated? Or is it okay if you're a part of an organization where you can literally enslave people or literally hurt people, and you're still acceptable in the religious sect? You're still acceptable. And so these are things I think we have to think about and talk about as we delve into whether that is monotheistic or not monotheistic. Yeah. And you say politically as well by creed. Yeah. He might have wanted to unify the different temples. Yeah, he could have maybe wanted to unify the different temples. That could have been, he may have wanted to do that. Maybe he wanted to just light of knowledge and wisdom. Okay. Maybe he wanted to unify the different temples. It becomes very important, because as I read about this, I was thinking about, when the Holy Roman Empire had it, when I'm talking about the, 700 AD or so, when the Pope was in control of certain parts of Europe, basically, and wanting to join forces with Charlemagne in France. You had the religion, and you had the king, and he wanted to use his army as well as the papacy army to kind of get more land and under their control. Who becomes in control? And I remember studying this and reading about this. And does the king Charlemagne submit to the Pope and let the Pope crown him as emperor, or does the king, basically stand over the Pope? This whole idea of religion versus politics, and here Akhenaten is being both, right? And to me, at the end of the day, what does it matter if it's not moral? How do we look at it? So a lot of times we'll talk about him as being monotheistic, and a lot of people will talk about him as being monotheistic, but don't really talk about what he believed, or if that was like good. So if he believed in Aten as being the one God, was he right? Was he not right? Do we understand that as being being a forerunner to things that come after him in terms of monotheism. And also an acknowledgement of the Kemetic people already having an understanding of an idea of everything coming from one source and God being a manifestation of everything and them honoring God and everything. So that becomes very, very, difficult to kind of sort through and to call each other on. So as we start to think about that, I wanted to jump out there, and I wanted to also mention this depiction of Nefertiti, because we never see Nefertiti depicted this way. This is Nefertiti. We typically see one depiction of Nefertiti, and that's the bust, the famous bust that is supposed to be of her. But we never really see all these other depictions of Nefertiti to give you such a variety and a different look at the woman. Once again, it challenges the narrative. We like to a lot of times put ancient Kemet in a box. Akhenaten was monotheistic. Well, he may have been good in his term, or it may have been more than that. It may have been a power struggle. It may have been a power grab. It may have been other things that were going on. And he wasn't the only person to understand that there is a one source of everything. So Akhenaten was monotheistic. Nefertiti looked like the bust, and that's the only depiction we can show. And there are many, many depictions of Nefertiti in various ways, all up and down Amarna, and even in Karnak, you find depictions of Nefertiti as well as his daughters. And then how does that impact us? So as he starts to do that, his time in Amarna and his time in terms of his worshiping of Aten and making that the central figure, if you will, in ancient Kemetic history and ancient Kemetic religious thought at the time, it was short-lived, because the people and the priests of Amen, the people who were worshiping Amen, that hidden aspect of God, were not having it, right? They were not having it for very long. I think that Akhenaten was in charge while he had the power, but very soon after his power began to wane and they began to fight up against it, and very soon after he died, they changed all that. They went and they tore down his temple in Amarna. It's just a relic of what it was. That city is a relic. You can barely find anything there. It's a relic. They went back and erased a lot of the depictions of Aten and put back up Amen. And so the priest and the people who were worshipers and servers of Amen kind of reversed everything. And Tuk Ak Amen is a reference to that. King Tut, being his son, has his name Tuk Ak Amen. He has his name instead of Aten, he's Amen. And so he goes back and restores that worship and the superiority, if you will, and the reference of Amen. So I just wanted to share it, and I wanted to hear your thoughts as I kind of look at the comments. Constantine was far from a decent Christian. Yes, very much so. Very much so. The whole thing about Constantine, and I think about that, because Constantine, I don't believe, he was baptized, I believe, on his deathbed. So you can correct me if I'm wrong right there, but I believe Constantine, he had a bishop that followed him, who was kind of like a historian, if you will, and you can read that bishop's information about Constantine. He wasn't baptized into his deathbed. And Constantine was really someone who, at that time, and especially in the early part of history, being baptized was really significant. That was really what brought you into the fold. You were to shun off all these other deities and these other ideas of God and to be committed to Christianity. But apparently Constantine kept up the worship and the ceremonies, at least in a political standpoint. He kept it up and didn't apparently get baptized in a Christian way until he was supposed to be Christian, until he died, or he was about to die. He was on his deathbed. So those are very interesting points. So thank you for bringing up thank you for bringing that point up, because that's an important point. Thinking about Akhenaten and why he did what he did, juxtaposing that to people like Constantine and Charlemagne, I think you're right. They fit along that same lines when you start to think about the idea of political power and religion and serving of God, and what does that mean for the people, and what does that make for a difference. So I thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear if you want more comments around this, if you have more that you want to see more about this topic or more videos, please put it down in the comments below. I want to kind of cover more things about that so that we can kind of jump into it. So I thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you share this information. And at the end of the day, he did begin to institute a worship, if you will, of Aten. It's a question about whether or not he did it for power reasons or out of his heart. And he may have done it out of his heart, but he was also the person who supposedly was the sole possessor of what the ideas of Aten was, what they were at that time, and how he was going to be able to share that with the rest of the country. So I just wanted to share that with you. So guys, thank you so much for watching. God bless you, and hope you have a good day.